everyone, welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I will be sharing with you guys something that I have been wanting to share on my channel, and it's about my life as a Korean American. So Amy actually tagged me to do the Asian American tag, but I wanted to do it a little differently by sharing with you guys my background story first before getting into those details. So I'm gonna start my story now. So if you didn't know, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and when I was about 3 and when my brother was born, our family, we moved to South Korea because my grandpa was diagnosed with cancer and my parents wanted us to spend time with him. And I remember going to preschool, 유치원, in Korea, and you know, I just grew up like learning how to speak Korean, and that's all I knew. But then when I was 5, I moved back and then I started attending school, and I was the only Asian in my school. So obviously I looked very different and I didn't know the language. So I mean, as a kid, I'm kind of like very similar to what I am now. I'm very extroverted and I love meeting new people, so I didn't really have a problem with making friends. But of course there was that language barrier, but I don't really remember like traumatic experiences like from kindergarten at all. So in 1st grade, that's when I kind of realized that I was different, because during reading time, I was always asked to, you know, come out of the room and then go to another classroom and do ESL courses with another teacher. And you know, that was very helpful for me, but I also hated it because I felt very different from my classmates, and they would always be like,
oh, it's like 11 o'clock, it's time for you to leave the classroom.
So that actually motivated me to study harder, and actually I'll be going into details of this later, but every time people pointed out that I was different or like a certain stereotype, I would always work extra hard just so that I would no longer be in ESL and that I could get better grades and things like that. So yeah, in 1st grade I had to deal with feeling different because I would always have to step out of the classroom for those ESL courses. And then I also remember a time when my like classmates, they were looking through a magazine, and it was a Britney Spears magazine, and I remember not knowing who she was, and my classmates made fun of me for not knowing who she was. And like, I grew up liking K-pop, so I'm a very OG K-pop fan. Like, I listened to it back when Pinker was around, Babybox, G.O.D, BoA, 장나라, like those were my idols. So for them to hate on me for not knowing who Britney Spears was, like, that was really sad on my end. But I remember like going to like Ralph's and Albertsons just to study the celebrities because I had no idea who any of them were. So 2nd grade comes around and a Korean moved to our district, and I was like, whoa, that's really cool. And I remember teachers asking me to come out of the classroom just to help her because I knew how to speak both English and Korean now. So I felt really good about doing that because for the first time I felt a sense of worth, because now people were praising me for knowing Korean and Korean culture. So I remember for like a whole year, the teachers would always let me sit with this girl, and I would always translate for her, help her, do her work and things like that. But then like later, I realized that she didn't want to do anything Korean anymore. So I kind of felt, how do I explain this? So I remember this girl kind of avoiding me because she just didn't want to practice Korean anymore. And I remember coming back home and I told my brother, I was like, Abe, from now on, we're gonna only speak English at home. And we started doing that to our parents as well. And I remember my mom feeling so sad afterwards, because if you think about it now, if I think about it now, my parents both sacrificed their comfortable life in Korea to move to America for me and my brother. And even after we moved, we still came back after 2 years of living in Korea because my parents wanted us to have an education in America. So I felt terrible about that. And I also got in trouble for trying to only speak English at home. And then after that, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna embrace Korean, and at home, it will just be Korean, and outside of it, I will just speak English. So I always kept it like I never shared this information with my friends at school just because, I don't know, I was always embarrassed about being Korean. So there's a little bit of my foundation. Now I'm going to answer some questions from the Asian American tag. I'm Korean American. My parents were both born in Seoul, South Korea, and then they moved to America, and then I was born. So I guess I would be 1.5 generation or second generation. My uncle always tells me I'm second generation, but I always feel like I am 1.5. I kind of shared this in my background story, but definitely when my classmates were flipping through the magazine and talking about Britney Spears, I knew there was something different about that. And also, none of my classmates looked like me. We had different eyes, we had different hair colors, and yeah, I knew for a fact that I was different. But also, when we all started to learn about Asian culture in history class, I remember people were like, oh, what kind of Asian were you again? Were you Chinese or Japanese? And when I would answer, I'm Korean, no one knew what Korea was. And I was like, oh, that's so strange. Like, I'm Korean and I know the language and the music and everything, but I felt kind of different there. And then when we learned about Korea, people would ask me, are you North or South? And actually, I went back home and asked my mom, like, am I North or am I South Korean? And my mom answered that I'm South Korean because both my parents were born in Seoul, South Korea. But later, I also learned that my grandpa, like one of my grandparents, he is from North Korea. And then I got to learn more about his story and his testimony, things like that. Even as a child, I was always very proud to be Korean, and I remember trying to share with my classmates who Boa was. But of course, I did mention in my background story where I did want to try to reject it, but I respected my parents too much to reject my Korean heritage, so I was very proud about it. This definitely changed throughout the years. So in elementary, junior high, and high school, the stereotype was Asians are smart. So I knew for a fact that I wasn't born with the brains. My brother is actually really, really intelligent, and I just kind of like got the grades that I needed, and Abe just went like above and beyond. But I definitely knew I wasn't like smart compared to my brother. But because all of my classmates kept telling me that Asians are smart, I would work extra hard. Like I mentioned before, I was the first child in my family. Like, I was the firstborn. My parents were both from Korea. They went to college in Korea, and they didn't really like, they weren't too strict with me, but I feel like they became strict with my brother because I would be like, no, mom, dad, Abe has to do this and that. So my brother always jokes around saying that I am his second mother. But yeah, one of the stereotypes that I did struggle with was like, Asians are smart, but that actually motivated me to take the classes that I took and get the grades that I got. When I went to college at UC Berkeley, that's when I met the most Asians. So like I mentioned before, I went to a school where I was the only Asian in the beginning, and then I think I can count like how many Asians attended my school with my hands, like in elementary school, and then it like obviously grew, the Asian community grew in our neighborhood. But in college, I never met so many Korean Americans, Koreans, like Asians overall, and I didn't really feel a stereotype because we were all the same. But then, when I moved to Korea, there was another stereotype that I had to deal with, which is being Korean American. How do I explain this kind of situation? People would kind of assume that I had a lot of money for speaking English, but that was definitely not the case. And then some people would just kind of point out that like, oh, I'm being very ignorant even though I knew Korean. So like, I remember like my friend and I, we were eating at this restaurant, and like the ladies right next to us were like, oh my gosh, she's so Korean, she looks Korean, but she's not speaking any Korean, and that's like a shameful thing. But then when I was paying for the food, I would speak in like Korean, and they were like, whoa. So like, I always felt like I had to prove myself that like, oh, I really try my best to learn both of the cultures. So yeah. Yes, I can, and I'm nowhere where I want to be because I didn't go to school here, but I can read, speak, and write Korean. Growing up, I learned how to be an adult a lot quicker than most because my parents needed help translating documents, and every time they needed to call like I don't know, like an electric bill company or a gas company, I had to do it with them sitting right next to me. So I remember, like, in the beginning I liked doing it, but then I also got angry every time I had to do this. But you know, like, that kind of got me closer to my mom because, you know, she was dealing with all of the finances and things like that. So I think growing up Korean American, like, my relationship with my like parents, it was always like a close one. I am very proud of being Korean American, and I was always proud of being Korean American. I love the food, I love the music, I love the films, art. Like, you guys watch Joan Day, and this is actually one of like my biggest goals, is to share Korea in a more realistic view. Definitely enjoying best of both worlds. In America, there are diners, and in Korea, there are 포장마차s, and I identify with both. Both has to do with food, actually, but you get what I'm trying to say here. So that was my story about growing up Korean American, and of course I answered the questions that Amy created for the Asian American tag. If you guys identify with any of this, please share your stories in the comment section below because I would love to read about it. If you guys enjoyed the sit down chat, please give this video a thumbs up, and here are the people that I tagged to do this Asian American tag. I would love to watch my friends share their experiences, so bug them about it too. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!